Welcome to GS Podcast number 143. Stephen Knight here. How the hell are you? Good. It's been a while. I've been busy. Although my wonderful Patreon supporters would have had this episode slightly earlier than standard release. So a big thank you to my supporters on Patreon. My entire content is listener supported. I don't work for any publications. I don't get paid. I don't charge for anything. This keeps me straight and narrow. This stops me. I don't have to toe to any particular narrative or house style. I can say exactly what I think. And you guys seem to appreciate that. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for supporting me on Patreon, which if you're not a supporter, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. There are numerous other ways to support the show, and you can find out more about them at gspellchecker.com/support. Okay, now we've got that out the way. I'm very pleased to welcome the return of Brian and Sean from Myth-Informed. Also, they are part of the group that runs the Mythicist Milwaukee MythCon convention, which I attended last year. I spoke on 2 panels and it was wonderful. I really appreciate what these guys are trying to accomplish. They're trying to have open, balanced discussions on really kind of significant but inflammatory topics. And you can tell just by speaking to them for longer than 5 minutes that they're really committed to this concept of battling ideas and trying to get to the truth of an issue rather than sort of trying to stoke controversy. They're incredibly professional and thoughtful, and I always enjoy speaking to them. So they'll be on the show to tell us about a wonderful new event in a couple of weeks' time called Minds IRL. The IRL's for in real life. It's about having in-person discussions. It's all about participation. And I'll be there in New Jersey. I'll be moderating 2 panels, which, like I said, some great topics. The first one is about migration. It's titled The Great Migration, a discussion on digital and physical immigration. So I'll be there to moderate speakers Lauren Chen, aka Roaming Millennial, Tim Poole, Daisy Cousins, and Tara Devlin. I'll also be on another panel in the afternoon called Nuance, Context and the Future of Comedy Online. That'll involve Gregory Fleur, I assume I've got that right, also known as Armored Skeptic, Mark Meekan, which you may know as Count Dankula, Blair White and Hunter Avallone. So I'm really looking forward to this. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in. It's always a great atmosphere, always plenty of ideas exchanged. There are never any fatwas declared. And you always learn something. So if you can be in the area on them dates, pick up some tickets, and you can do this by visiting irl.minds.com, and you get a juicy little discount if you enter the promo code Stephen. That's Stephen with a PH, the proper Greek way. So yeah, go to irl.minds.com and get your tickets for that event, and I will see you there. I may even buy you a drink, who knows. So without further ado, here's Brian and Sean to tell us all about the event. We get into it about social media, about the political climate, about social justice activism, extremism, the power that rhetoric can have on the political discourse, and I really enjoyed it. So let me know what you think. You can find me on Twitter at gspellchecker.com. I'll put Brian and Sean's details in the show notes, so send them some love, send them some feedback, and hopefully I shall see you in New Jersey. Enjoy.
There's a word that some folks find real hard to spell. Ain't it horrible for me, except after seeing who cared to go burn in hell? But then along came a man, a spell took corrupt the God of Creed, and he set out upon a noble quest to help those that don't know what it means. And he said, go A-T-H-E-I-S-T, and don't you put that I before that E. A-T-H-E-I-S-T, don't mean we know, speak to double E. And he keeps on out things that God let's say, a reason shoppers at night will make them run away. But if they start that fight, well they can go all day. Spell check it, easy, got to spell check it. Now you know how it goes, I sing along with me. A-T-H-E-I-S-T, A-T-H-E-I-S-T, A-T-H-E-I-S-T.
I'm very pleased to welcome the return of Sean and Brian of Myth-Informed. Sean and Brian, how are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having us, Stephen.
Hey, Stephen.
Entirely my pleasure. I always enjoy catching up. We're here to talk a little bit about a new event you've got planned in New Jersey, Minds IRL. Now, many of my listeners will know you previously from MythCon, Mythicist Milwaukee's MythCon convention. I can't believe I got that all out in one go without any issues. So why the change? Why are we under a new banner? What's new?
So we went, we've rebranded from Mythicist Milwaukee to Myth Informed because we don't really focus on the Mythicist stuff anymore, and we've really crossed over into like the social politics and social issues, and so that was the first rebranding. So we're Myth Informed now as a result. And then as far as the Minds IRL event series, we actually, after the last MythCon in Milwaukee, MythCon 5, last year, we started talking with Tim Pool from Subverse and Bill Ottman, who is the CEO of Minds.com. And they were on the same wavelength as far as mission, creating dialogue with people and having open conversations. So that's kind of how we all came together and started putting together the idea of this event series that we call Minds IRL, trying to get people off the internet and in real life, talking, having conversations, and trying to, bridge some of these divides that we have.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In-person conversation seems like a rare art in the the internet generation. But maybe you could explain to me and my listeners a little bit about what Minds.com is, because I believe that is actually a social network, an almost alternative platform for discussions that would usually take place on Twitter or elsewhere. What's the goal of that platform?
Right. So Minds is also a social media platform, similar to Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth, but smaller. And Minds has the Bill of Rights that they say. So they tend to be pro free speech and free expression. So one of the worries is people getting booted off social media, and is there a bias? Why are we getting booted off? And it's one reason if you know the rules. But many times when people are getting kicked off Twitter or getting kicked off YouTube, they're not given a reason.
Yeah.
So no one's able to even learn from the deplatforming. Nobody knows.
Yeah,
so
what to do, what not to do. Yeah.
Yeah, Minds is kind of putting it, look, this is our standard. This will be enforced across the board objectively. And we think that that's where social media companies ought to do. So we wanted to partner with a social media company that did that.
And they're actually innovating the space right now with their jury system, which is very interesting. So let's say, Stephen, you put something up about Tommy Robinson, and it gets taken off for some reason, right? The post gets deleted or something. There's actually, they'll generate a jury system based on random selected users that they'll send the post out or whatever was banned off out to those users so they can vote and say, hey, is this something that crosses the line? Is this something that should be censored? And they've actually had really good success with this. They've had some things that were initially labeled as, against their Bill of Rights, but the jury system came back and they actually overturned the decision. And, so it's instead of like Twitter and Facebook where you get no notifications and sometimes you're guessing as to what posts.
And you get the least biased jury, right? I mean, if you had a jury of activists, forget it. They're
right.
going to go with whatever they think.
I mean, there's a lot to be said about these big conglomerate social media companies now, the effect they have on the political discourse. I don't think there is any such thing as political discourse anymore if it's not thought about in the context of social media. So I think we all agree that these giant entities like Twitter and Facebook, they are private entities and they can sort of pick and choose who's allowed to operate on them platforms, but at the same time it is having an effect on the political landscape, isn't it? These social media companies, they have us by the balls, for want of a better expression, don't they? They kind of control the narrative in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's scary too. And, there's a little bit of hypocrisy in the users, though. We actually talked about this with Emily Molly from Subverse last week. Donald Trump is like one of the guys. Like he's the one complaining. He had the social media summit at the White House where he brought in a bunch of people it's kind of like what Tim Pool called a VIP rally, essentially. But he had a bunch of social media creators go to the White House and talk about censorship and demonetization and all this. But Trump also wields the power. If he would choose like a Minds or a Gab or one of the other alternate options right now, a lot of people would leave Twitter and all the mainstream social media accounts and follow him, you know. So at the same time, I understand the concern with a lot of what people are saying with censorship, but we also have it within our power to boycott and to utilize other social media outlets to kind of curb some of that, you know?
Yeah, I think we've all become a little bit settled in our ways rather than producing alternatives. Can somebody explain to me the court ruling about Donald Trump not being able constitutionally to block people on Twitter? Is this some strange dream I've had, or is that a real thing that has happened?
It is a real thing, and I don't know the exact legal piece of this, but ultimately it's some sort. It's a journalist piece where you're not allowed to block journalists away from you. So, you know,
which is bizarre.
Yeah, I can't remember, but so it does the way the law is written, it sort of does run afoul of that.
Well, and it's also a strange situation too, because they're saying Donald Trump can't block any users, but then the platform itself has the ultimate ability to block whoever they want. So they're essentially saying the platform is more powerful than the president, which is really interesting. You know, like it's I don't know. I think it was a bad decision. I think it was the Supreme Court, right, that ruled.
Yeah, it's right now. That's the way the law is being interpreted.
Yeah,
and I just don't know any more than that. But it is legit.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how they set out some guidelines not long after the whole kind of Russia shenanigans to say that they won't meddle with politics. They won't interfere in that way yet. I mean, does that mean that political figures are immune from being removed from the platform? Did somebody like, say, Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, when he stood for UKIP, he'd already been banned from Twitter and he was denied that option for his political campaigning. So it's a very murky area when you have you know, a company that's really overtly trying to police the political discussion from what appears to me from a left-wing bias.
Yeah. And also, what's Russia, right? Now, if the Russian government itself, if this is the Kremlin, like sending out, you know, social media, either fake accounts or doing whatever they're going to do. Well, what if it's a Russian national that has close ties to Russia but is otherwise an American citizen? Is that Russia? You know, what about RT? What about our Russian RT TV? You know, what is Russia? You know, that this is it. It really makes, you know, a tough claim. I mean, if Russia can't interfere, what about the UK? And what about you? Are you the UK? Are you just an individual?
Yeah, I am the official representative of all things UK.
Massive platform, though. You know, if your platform was gigantic, I mean, are you the UK? Are you an individual? You know, what if you had a Russian who is just very popular? Is that the government? Like, this is murky.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about the event planned for August in New Jersey, which I'm very grateful to be coming along to moderate 2 panels on, which I'm really looking forward to. The sort of tagline you've chosen for this event is ending racism, violence, and authoritarianism. And I just wanted to get your views really on why you chose those 3 things to focus on.
Yeah, I know it sounds like, when on the surface, a very social justice forward title. And I think that's part of the confusion, is like that the left is pro social justice and the right is anti social justice, and that's not always the case. I mean, you know, I would consider myself at least slightly on the right, but I don't like racism. I don't want political violence, and I don't want authoritarianism of any stripe, you know, whether it comes from the left or the right. So really what we were saying is we think that both extremes don't know how to talk about these things properly. So we said we're going to put this right in the title and talk about it, and I think a fair way.
Yeah, it's the interesting with our makeup with our organizations. Brian's center right, I'm center left, Fritz is center left. I mean, if you go down, like, we're a bunch of like centrists, and
Michael's solidly on the left.
Yeah, we do have one progressive person, but it was funny, like, seeing the QLED article after MythCon 5 talking about extreme centrism.
Radical centrism.
radicocentrism.
But
So
I mean,
it's,
that was a nice way. That was his description of it.
No, but it I think the centrists lack an identity in a lot of cases. It's interesting because like we're the one, like I think if you're in the center, you can pull from the right and the left. You can pull things you like from each side, and you can stay skeptical on each side. It's this weird archaic tribalism that's like if you're not on the left, you're against us, or if you're not on the right, you're against us. I think we need to start getting past some of those things.
Yeah.
And this is part of this event is bringing a bunch of people from all different backgrounds and viewpoints together and start talking about this.
And also, when you have like the bell curve of ideas, this doesn't mean that if you are on the far left or even the far right, that you're 100% wrong. Even the extremes and people like farther out have salient points about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just generally the entire narrative doesn't make sense. But we want to hear all those kind of points of view and see what we can amalgamate and again, let the best ideas float to the top.
Yeah, I think tribalism's back in a big way, isn't it, at the moment? But it's interesting what you say there about those things. The tagline, it almost comes across as sort of a social justice warrior proclamation. And I think we're all for social justice, but I think that term's been ruined and muddied in the same way that feminism has it, in the sense of the bad actors are taken ownership of it, and they seem to have the loudest voice, the point where the labels and the much needed descriptors become so toxic and dirty that we don't want to apply them to ourselves. So we're in a position now where I have to say I'm not a feminist because feminism's become so crazy. I don't want to be lumped in with them, and I have to say I'm not a social justice advocate because the people speaking most loudly about that are absolutely insane too. So what's the game here? Do we try and reclaim the area and space and the language, or do we try and redefine it in terms that aren't as incendiary currently?
Yeah, I don't think you can redefine the words, right? I mean, the words are the words. You may get them back, you may not. But it seems like more often than not, you don't get the words back. So I think you have to find a way to describe it. Let's talk about women's issues, feminism, men's issues, whatever you want to talk about. Let's talk about. You can even use the word. Let's talk about feminism in a sane way.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it sanely. Let's not have a big bringing up fight, but let's take it idea by idea. And
the other thing too, it's like no matter what, it's not our goal to take back any words. It's really, what are we seeing are the topics, the big heavy hitters right now. I mean, if you look at what happened to Andy Ngo with political violence, if you're seeing like some of the rhetoric that's coming out of the political conversations, the authoritarianism and, people labeling others certain things that they're not. I mean, these are right now, this is what's hot, this is what, and obviously racism. And you can even make an argument, like even those on the left are being racist in their own ways. It's really interesting. So the topics are really, really kind of in the forefront. And
there's a way to end racism. I mean, you could end racism against one group by just flipping the discrimination towards the other group.
Yeah.
That'd be one way to fight racism. I don't think that's the best way, but it's one way.
And I'm not a fan of identity politics. If you follow our Twitter, we've been seeing some of the stuff we're talking about identity politics. I just, in order to get past racism, in my mind, we have to start treating people the same way we would treat anybody else and stop judging people based on their skin color. And, unfortunately, on the progressive left, that's what we're seeing is we should treat people of a certain color a certain way. I think that's all garbage. We got to just start treating everyone the same. And, someone's a dick, be a dick to everyone. If someone's a nice person, be nice to, it's just the way it is.
The argument becomes one of history.
Yeah.
So they say, well, the reason why it's okay to be a little more sexist against men than it is women is because historically, if you take the swath of human civilization, men have been, quote unquote, privileged for all this amount of time. So basically there's a buffer zone for sexism. I mean, that's literally what it says. Is they always say you have to think of the history. Mm-hmm. No, I don't know if we do.
Right.
I think what you try to do is get it even, because all you're trying to do is, once you talk about the history, now you're talking about flipping the discrimination. What do we need? Oppression against men for 8,000 years to even it out. Then we can go and get it equal again? Come on.
Going back to what you were saying there about progressives and their reflexive need to protect minorities, or say they, or at least pay lip service to the idea that's what they're doing. I think that unraveled very quickly when we saw the Antifa attack on Andy Ngo, because Andy Ngo, you guys know him very well. You've had him at the conference. That's where I met him. I've kept in touch with him before and after that. Sweet guy. And he's been documenting Antifa violence and misbehavior for quite some time now. And the mainstream media are either endorsing Antifa a lot of the time, or they're very slow to catch on to the nefarious elements. And what we saw is this is what really irritated me about it. We had a gay Vietnamese unarmed journalist set upon by a group of masked white individuals. And when I pointed out that this ethnic minority gay man was being beaten in the street by white masked men, I got this strange response of, well, aha, I thought you didn't buy into identity politics. And, well, my point wasn't that. My point is, well, you guys do. You guys say you do. But it seems that these things only matter, minorities, LGBT rights, whether someone's non-white. These things only seem to matter to your narrative if these people also share your political ideology. So it just seems to me like the whole intersectional concern is one based on bullshit, if we go solely off this latest episode.
Right. Well, that's the point. When Andy gets attacked, that the defense is, and I've read the people that are defending Antifa, or at least somewhat sympathetic to him, and they say, but the reason he was attacked wasn't because he was gay, and it wasn't because he was Asian, right? That it was specifically for what he was doing, which is actually correct.
Yeah, that's true.
When Republicans are criticizing, say, Ilhan Omar, and they're criticizing at AOC, like Cortez, or they're criticizing Ayanna Pressley, they're always saying, you are attacking women of color.
Yeah.
Well, no. Why isn't the same thing? They're attacking their ideas. Mm-hmm. So, but I think it's so weird how on one, no, you're attacking the person, but no, we're just attacking Andy's ideas.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting, the biggest defense that I saw on the left of the attacking Andy Ngo was he deserved it. He was asking for it. His skirt was too short.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the most disgusting defenses I saw with that. And
well, there were some other ones. He was descendants. He's a descendant of the U.S. puppet government of South Vietnam.
Yeah,
I saw that one.
They started into conspiracy theories, but it was, ultimately it's just a disgusting act, and it was really interesting seeing him bending over, doing cartwheels, trying to figure out how to defend this thing, and there was no defense to it. I mean, no one should ever get violated and essentially jumped. Especially since he, if he was out there had a crowbar swinging at people, that's a completely different story. He was out there with a camera. This is not how we should be behaving.
Yeah, and at Trump rallies,
we should be condemning that.
At 100%. Trump rallies, that it's often that say the CNN person covering it will get a lot of crap. Mm-hmm. Slurs thrown at them. Get out, whatever. That's bad, right? That's not good. I mean, so. Really, if you're going to justify violence against Andy Ngo, then why not? Then I guess the people at the Trump rally from CNN are free game.
Yeah. But that also, that's the other interesting thing is for me with the Andy situation, the LGBT community never really came out and condemned this. They, if this would have been let's say the queer kid stuff person on YouTube, that person, if she was out there, and she got attacked, oh my God, everyone would have came out. But because Andy's critical against Islam, because Andy was critical against Antifa, it's like, oh, they're saying this guy deserves it.
He loses his minority status.
Yeah.
That's the worry, that in order to have the minority status, in order to be protected under these protections, which aren't necessarily bad, but you have to have the right viewpoint. That's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting point you make about the not defense of the act, but why it's different in terms of identity politics, because he wasn't attacked for being gay or Vietnamese, which is true. But I don't think that level of nuance would be offered. If I got into a physical altercation with a guy from South Asia over a parking dispute or some other, non-ideologically related or race-related thing, and I kick the shit out of him, people wouldn't judge me charitably about that. That would be a racist attack all of a sudden. And I think you have to draw parallels a little bit with the outrage that we saw, the sustained outrage and commentary and wall-to-wall reporting on the one white Trump school kid who smiled at a Native American man. The absolute hysteria surrounding that non-incident, whereas we have a guy beat up in the street and everyone else seems to be looking the other way. So I don't know how we can get to I mean, I thought we'd arrived at this place quite a while back politically, where we'd all decided that throwing punches and launching things at each other was a bad way to go, regardless of your political persuasion. I just like to get your feeling on why that feels like it's going backwards a little bit since the election of Donald Trump.
Well, I blame the UK actually with the milkshaking. I mean, like I was out there for Carl's, UKIP tour, and it was just funny. Like I was talking to people. We were in 3 cities on the countryside, and I think it was in Totnes where I was talking to people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's just milkshakes. Yeah, we expect that. I mean, it's just a thing." And like the first time I saw someone throw something at him, I was like, what is in there? I had no idea what could have been in that substance. But that was interesting. But you guys just seem like, it's just milkshake. So I don't know. It's this weird situation now where we feel throwing milkshakes is acceptable. And of course you see the escalation. Of course you see, quote unquote, quick dry cement potentially being in there, other substances, which I knew that was going to happen. And then
has that been confirmed? Just as a quick digression there, I've seen multiple conflicting reports on that.
Yeah, they definitely never confirmed it. But I mean, you do see the escalation from milkshakes to punching Andy to firebombs at the ICE facility.
I totally agree. I think when it comes to either limiting speech or endorsing violence, the slippery slope argument, which is usually a fallacy, is always applicable. Violence always begets violence, and I think we saw that in the UK. I'm not sure if Tommy Robinson was patient zero for the milkshaking fiasco, but at an event in the northwest of England not long after, a group calling themselves the Muslim Defence League put out social media posts saying, "Bring your milkshakes or anything else you'd like to throw at Tommy Robinson." And what we saw on that day was not only eggs being thrown, but bricks, bricks in residential areas and stones. So these things, like you say, use the word escalation, but these things do escalate straight away. And I'm always the guy who's saying, I'm the guy who's saying, don't even shove people. You know what I mean? I'm the guy he'll be like, don't even use foul language, just keep it civil, because these things always go down a very dark path. And I'm the guy looking silly who's saying, don't throw beverages, and people respond with it, well, it's just a milkshake, it's not serious. It's funny, if anything, to see the figure of hate covered in a white substance, but it is a dangerous precedent to set.
Well, I'm going to defend. I'm not going to throw the tea off the boat, and I'm going to defend the UK and say that I don't think it's the milkshakes. I'm convinced that this is media, like the average media, and then social media. So the media is creating a narrative of, wow, this is extreme. It's fascism. We have to guard against this, and then the right will say, wow, these people are un-American, or they're communist. These people want to do away with all of your rights, turn men into women, and so on and so forth. And then social media exacerbates this. And I think there's a lot of people that are legitimately afraid because they're getting an alarmist narrative all the time. So a lot more people are on edge. And when you have a lot of people on edge, a handful of those are going to actually do things that are really bad, violence, or call in bomb threats, or do other nasty things like try to get people fired, unemployed. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
but the less people that you have afraid, the less of those the radicals that you're going to get.
Yeah,
but when the temperature is higher, you're going to have a lot more chance for fire.
Yeah, we were talking about this too in our last interview as well, as far as like Twitter and social media, what it's done to people's kind of psyche. It's the I want to be first mentality. I got to be first. So everyone's constantly watching the stuff, and when you're constantly consuming this political divide and this craziness, I mean, like Brian's saying, it's like you kind of get into a world where you think the world's falling apart, the sky's falling, and then you want to go out and firebomb the ICE facility. And this is, But
most people are just going to fire back on Twitter. Right.
Yeah,
Most
right.
people are going to
But-
either, do that.
But the other thing that happens too is when you show up to these protests and you say, "Oh, it's Carl Benjamin, you got to go protest them." So you'll have the normal people that'll show up and like, "I don't know what's going to happen. We're just going to show up." And then you have the quote unquote leaders or the people that are doing the most egregious things start getting all the attention. Then you see like the mob mentality where everyone follows suit. And that's where the escalation comes from. It's
Yeah.
like Lord of the Flies for like, basement dwellers, I guess.
Well, as an outsider looking in, it seems like a very precarious situation in the States. And I always say that obviously freedom of expression is paramount and everyone has personal agency. If somebody acts in a nefarious way, it's their personal responsibility. And I would definitely apply that to the individual who was killed by police firebombing that ICE facility. But I just wondered what sort of effect it has on individuals like that when you have sort of senior people within the American government referring to these facilities as concentration camps. And I mean, is that even a fair comment?
Well, it's not a fair comment for sure, but like there is a good question: does rhetoric like promote these things? And this is the criticism against Donald Trump all the time, that he's so bad in his rhetoric that it quote unquote normalizes these things, right? That it normalizes, you say, anti-Muslim sentiment or anti-immigrant sentiment. I don't know, maybe, but when you call it concentration camps, why wouldn't that also be in the maybe?
Yeah,
Like, I don't know. It could.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm open to that possibility, but
Yeah.
I'm just not sure.
Well, and I'm with you, Stephen, as far as like people having it be their personal responsibility of their actions. I mean, if they are going to these things and they're acting crazy, they deserve to get arrested. They deserve to, the punishment of what comes along with that. I personally think, if you truly care about these things and you truly want to make a difference, there are ways of going about it that don't endanger somebody's life or, starts violence in the streets or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things, and that's kind of what we do with our events. It's like, our events, we put them on not just for us, we're putting them on to give you guys the opportunities, the speakers, the opportunities to come and discuss these things sanely, and I think we are making an impact. All of us collectively in that event are making an impact. It's just, there's better ways of doing these things. I am not a fan of protests. I've never have been. I think it actually does worse for your side, protests. If you look at Charlottesville, if you would have just let those idiots like march in the street, and that no one would have ever paid any attention to.
Yeah,
it.
and Heather Heyer probably would have still been with us.
Yes.
Exactly. And I think I was somewhere in the UK or maybe it was France. There's like every year there's these white nationalists that march in the streets, and what the citizens have done, instead of protesting it, they actually like have people sign up kind of like a marathon where if they walk a certain amount of miles, like people will pay money that'll go to a charity that fights racism.
Yeah.
I forget
that's
which-
great.
The longer the fascists
That-
march, the more it gets donated.
Yeah, exactly. So the more
So they sort of cheer them on because
Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah.
Isn't that? I mean, that's just brilliant. That's a innovative, creative way to tackle that problem. It's like you're still giving them their right to go out. Like it's like the straight.
And that's a legit white nationalist,
Yeah.
like you're like kind of Euro first white nationalist.
Exactly, and then the money goes to charities that
An anti-extremism charity.
Exactly, and the thing, the interesting thing that's coming up is going to be the Straight Pride Parade, which actually is happening on the same day that our event's happening. So we're in Jersey and they're in Boston. But I just, I think it's silly. I think it's dumb. I don't know why they're doing it, but I know what's going to happen is you're going to get protesters that are going to show up to this thing with good intentions that you're going to see fallout, and it just needs to stop.
Yeah, I think it's easier to mobilize on a bad idea now. We have the social media to connect us all to it. Well, speak a little bit about the event for me then. In New Jersey, what sort of panels can we expect? I mean, which ones would you say are probably the ones that have the potential for a bit of fiery discussion? Which topics in there are the ones that are kind of really prominent in the public psyche at the moment?
No, well, there's nothing controversial at all. So
and anyone that you're moderating.
yeah,
Stephen,
right.
that's
Because
gonna
like the first one is the Great Migration, a discussion of digital and physical immigration.
So you'll see some of
nothing
these
controversial about immigration.
You'll see some of these titles were tweaked a little bit because we are working with a corporation now. We had wording that we would have used if we were running on our own, but now they're working with Minds. We had to corporate it up a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So the first one we're discussing. We're kind of what we were talking about, the Russian influence, and then also the physical immigration.
Yeah, so immigration, physical immigration just means what normal immigration means. But digital, we're talking about that kind of influence. Like things are changing. You know, social media, I think, is responsible for pushing this. I can't even lay all the blame on the mainstream media because social media is able to just run away with itself too. So what's happening as far as our information exchange? It's migrating to social media. So we're discussing both of those things.
So we're looking at that. We're also looking at
and on that panel, that's going to be Tim Pool, Daisy Cousins, Tara Devlin, and Lauren Chen.
Yeah, and Daisy Cousins. That's her. I don't know if that's her. Is that her first time in the U.S.?
It might be. She's an Australian, I believe, conservative.
Yeah, she's a conservative out of Australia. And then
and Tara Devlin has got a podcast.
Yeah, they have a very, very staunch immigration policy in Australia, so it'll be interesting to hear her opinions on that.
Yeah, Tara's a progressive on that panel. If you look at all the panels, what we tried to do is bring a centrist, bring a progressive, bring
balance them as best
conservative. Yeah, balance them as best we can. So that's
and the people critique these all the time. Could you do it better? Yes, you could always do it better. Yeah. If you had more money, you could bring in. You'd have better choices.
Yeah, and I always love it. It's like, oh, you should have Joe Rogan at this. It's like, yeah, no shit.
Right. We'd love
wonderful.
We should travel to the event in a Cessna.
Well, I know you guys have tried really hard in the past to try and get people involved who represent the further left end of the political scale, so-called progressives, people like that. And I was just wondering, have you had more luck this time around?
No, we do have progressives coming to the event, and those that are coming, we're really, really excited and honored to work with them. But I mean, we sent out, we spent. It was a collective effort of like 80 hours emailing, and this was like. With all the people in the org, just taking turns sending it out. And I think, what was it? We sent out...
we sent a lot of emails.
We sent
our hit rate's
we
low.
Sent out 200 emails, and we got it was like 15 responses. And of the 15, it's like what we ended up, whittling down to those that could make it. Which was interesting. The other interesting thing is... So
it's not like we're getting zero, but I think right away, like to be totally fair, I think some of the people on the left, there's a perception that we're not going to be fair, that the audience is going to be completely one-sided, and they're like, God, I don't think I want to do this.
Which isn't the case.
But I understand that, but it's not actually the case. I mean, what we saw with MythCon 5, that there was as many progressives there as there were conservatives, and the rest of the people were somewhere in the middle.
I remember looking at the lineup for that event and thinking it really should have been an intersectionalist dream conference in terms of the amount of diversity of thought and ethnicities and genders, etc., that you managed to get all under one roof. But I suspect you were not given any credit for that.
No.
Right.
No, we're not.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Now, I'll give a lot of credit to Music Man Mike and Chrissy Osty for showing up, because they both were worried that the crowd would be against them, and
Marissa Janae Johnson.
Yeah, and Marissa Janae Johnson, same way. But they came, and what was cool, at least in their cases, they found out that some of those perceptions weren't right.
Yeah.
That in fact, wow, they had fans there, and they were excited to you came to see me, and the person, that's why I came, and that it was a lot different.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because we do have progressives coming this year. We mentioned Tara Devlin. We have Jeff Waldorf from TYT. We have Graham Elwood, who's a stand-up comedian, he's really in with I'm forgetting the big lefty stand-up comedian. I'm forgetting his name.
Jim Jeffries?
No, Jimmy Dore.
Oh, Jimmy Dore.
Yeah,
yes, Jimmy Dore.
Jimmy Dore.
Yeah. And David Packman.
But
have we officially lost Jim Jeffries to the left now? I think that's been a slow.
saying that.
I think so.
But now the other side of that is it could be Comedy Central.
Yeah, it could
Right.
be. But it's funny, we got Megan Murphy too, which is an interesting situation because she's a lefty, but she's like even a splint off of that too. So that's interesting.
So she's like the radical feminists that get labeled TERFs, and we'd asked her.
Explain what a TERF is.
So a TERF, for those people who don't know, it stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. So these are like the typical 1970s radical feminists, but they don't think that men should take any part in feminism. That means for bio men, but it also means for trans women that were born men but now are women. They can't be a part of this either. And the intersectional crowd does not like that. So they have been kind of booted from the coalition.
It's very interesting.
It is very interesting. Yeah, it's one of these strange areas of discourse now, which, considering it only seems to affect a tiny, minuscule proportion of any society, seems to be on everyone's agenda. And it doesn't seem like a rights issue at the moment to me. It seems like an ideological issue. It seems that in order to accept that trans people should have just as much rights as I do, which I completely accept and would endorse and do endorse, I also have to swallow a lot of batshit ideological nonsense about gender and various other things. So it's strange to see that battle take place now, and it's especially strange to see it largely play itself out between women. Historically, if you're going to look at this, I mean, I know for some reason trans people get thrown into the LGBT bracket, and I think it's kind of like a false comparison in that sense, but I think historically, if you look back at the people giving gay people the hardest time, it was probably men. And now it seems like in the terms of the trans debate, men are seemingly not too bothered. They'd rather just not, they don't care about it so much. But it seems like it's the women that are going to war on this issue.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
What do you mean the women going to which women?
So we're talking in terms of the trans exclusionary radical feminists are now at war with the women who are intersectionalist and things like that. And it's the women that seems to have the most concerns about new rules regarding restrooms.
Yes, because and we actually had Megan on the podcast, and it was interesting hearing her side of it. I don't agree with a lot of it. I can see where she's coming from, though, but they're looking at like safe spaces for women. So, for instance, a women's locker room, a women's
there was
prison,
an abuse shelter that she specifically talked about.
Yeah, sports. Should men be competing as women in sport? I mean, so it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Well, her biggest point was like, what if you had a battered woman's shelter, and that these people are going to feel afraid around men, right? They've just been beaten up by their significant other or something.
Mm-hmm.
So can you have a women's only space? Now, she's also like, trans people can also get beaten up, right? But what she was saying is then maybe have a trans only space.
Yeah,
because some of the women are getting freaked out, and that's what she was saying.
Well, she advocates for trans safe spaces, but the interesting thing is, I get it. I look at someone like Blair White, who Blair White is a woman. There's no choice there. She's a woman. But I think what Megan is saying is there are some men that will feign to be trans in order to get into these spaces, and I don't know.
Or could you create that? I don't think that there's a ton of evidence that there's men that are doing that already.
Correct.
But once you put it in law, now you're creating the loophole. It's like a tax loophole.
Yeah.
It wasn't intentional, but now all these people are using it now that it's legal. For example, Blair White, who is a very passable trans woman, like, did you see her video where she tried to use the men's restroom as they was told by, so giving a point to the intersectionalist here.
Yeah.
That was told to use the men's restroom. So she tries to at this hotel, and that she gets booted out.
She gets booted out.
Yeah, she.
That's clever.
Like all the people in there, like, look, you can't be doing this. You're making people uncomfortable. Like, you can't do that.
Exactly.
Well, that's supposedly the one. So when you put this down to brass tacks, that radical feminist argument doesn't work.
Yeah, she does exude an obvious level of feminism, Blair. Something like I spent a tiny bit of time saying hello to her at MythCon 5, and it's just something you accept instinctively whilst you're in her presence.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's other times where you have certain instincts or perceptions of people that are trans where it doesn't go that way, and it's interesting to try and find out psychologically what that is, what the indicators are, and what that means in terms of acceptance and where we draw the lines in terms of bathrooms. And I think this is an argument that's bigger than me, but I just seem to feel like the collateral damage so far seems to be women, just general, cisgendered women seem to be paying the brunt of the fallout from these bad decisions.
I agree. And the one thing that caught me up was like the women's prison system, where let's say you did have a man that had really bad intentions, where he's like, yeah, now I'm a trans right before I get arrested, and then he gets sent to the women's prison. Obviously, that creates an issue because of the issue of rape. Now, I think the best way to combat that, honestly, is in the prison systems. So how do you fix the prison systems? I mean, the fact that rape is rampant in the men's prison systems, and then if men are going to women's, like that's the bigger issue there, in my opinion. And then like the secondary thing is the trans issue, in my opinion. But
these are tough issues.
These are really
not
tough.
Going to be solved with like
exactly.
rigid ideology.
I've spent we're preparing for that interview. I spent a long time like trying to think through a lot of these things, and they're tough. They're really big issues. So.
What I tend to find as well, we touched on narratives previously in terms of the media and activists and things like that. I don't feel, unfortunately, like a lot of media-based reporting now is facts and data-driven. Right. Unfortunately, and I have to read from alternative sources to find out that, guess what? American police aren't just gunning down unarmed black men for no reason whatsoever all the time. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but the narrative that's been spun from certain outlets and certain mainstream media circles gives me this view of America that just simply does not map on to the data, and I'm having to find alternative sources now to give me a more reasonable picture of the situation. And I'm just wondering why someone like CNN can't lead with statistics and facts rather than emotive reporting on sort of outlying issues.
Yeah, and you'd have a certain amount. This is where rhetoric can play. I mean, if you looked at like Goebbels and the Nazi propaganda, are we going to say that had no impact on the level of anti-Semitism and the level of what was going on, and to a certain look the other way because we know that these people are evil? When we interned the Japanese in 1941. Do we think that some of like the war propaganda was showing like the Japanese in buck's tooth and you can't trust, loose lips, sink ships, that, anybody here might be, a collaborator? Of course, this makes people look the other way on normal, healthy, very integrated Japanese citizens.
Yeah, but I think what's the bigger issue with CNN and the mainstream publications these days is they're competing with independents. They're competing with the Andy Knows. They're competing with people that are on the ground that can get these stories right away. So what they're doing is they're utilizing kind of the same tactics and trying to be the first of the story, but they're also playing on people's emotions with a lot of what they're reporting.
It's ethics.
And what I will say, like they just had Richard Spencer on, which was like a whole thing in its own. But I'll use this opportunity to plug Subverse, which is Tim Pool and Emily Molly's media source. And we just had Emily on. If you don't know who she is, she's fantastic. She's been a journalist for a long time, and they started Subverse. And what they're doing is they're approaching it from a factual basis. They're trying to take journalism back to when it was on the facts. And it was interesting. One of the things Brian had asked her, how do you solve for your own bias? So if you're going in and you're already like, yeah, I agree with X or disagree with X, how do you go in and report on that from a non-biased standpoint? She said, what we'll do is we'll take our journalists that don't really know the situation, put them on the ground, and just have them talk to people so they can get the people's interpretation of what's happening. It's really interesting. And yeah, their channel is on YouTube. They also have like website and stuff, but it kind of reminds me of the original Vice when Vice was doing the on the ground, like real factual reporting. So yeah, they're a really good source, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, as long as CNN and MSNBC and all of them are competing for clicks, I don't know how, I don't know what the solution is there.
Well, one of the things that's close to my heart and was a line for me was when this sort of intersectional far left interference started transgressing in the realm of comedy. We're finding it's difficult now for comedians to say what they think. They seem to water down a lot of their jokes or take the easy option or only play to the status quo in terms of their comedy. And that's one of the panels that I'll be moderating there as well about comedy. And obviously it features Mark Meekan, aka Count Dankula, who was prosecuted for a joke, essentially a joke video in YouTube. We've had people arrested in this country for posting jokes, quote unquote offensive limericks and things like that. As a matter of fact, we just recently had some good news on this score in terms of maybe there's a shift in attitude. I don't know if you read the story of the man who was fired from his job at a supermarket in the UK. It's called Asda. It's owned by Walmart. Now, this gentleman on his personal Facebook page posted a YouTube clip of Billy Connolly. And if you don't know Billy Connolly, he's a very foul-mouthed Scottish comedian based in the UK. But he's beloved. He's a national treasure. People absolutely adore him. He's not sort of alternative in any way. You can get, oddly enough, you can buy his DVDs in Walmart and Asda. Now, what happened is this clip that was posted contained Billy Connolly ranting against religion. He took a swipe at Catholicism. He took a swipe at Islam. And it was very tame and it was quite crude and rudimentary. And what happened is a number of the Muslim colleagues of this man complained to the HR team at Asda, and this man was fired. He was let go because he contained in his biography on Facebook that he worked for this place. By that association, Asda decided that they had to let him go. And there was quite a lot of pushback. A lot of the newspapers ran with it. Even the National Secular Society in the UK picked it up and ran with it. And luckily, the other day, it was announced that they have give him his job back. So, I mean, do you think maybe we might be seeing a tipping point now?
Well, that's one bright spot.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good to hear. I mean, yeah, it was really like when, even Ricky Gervais, I know you've been working with him a lot. He's come under fire with some of the stuff he said. I mean, my contention when we first started getting into this a couple of years ago was always, well, they can't go for stand-up comedy. Like that's where bridges or lines are crossed, and that's where like people can really actually go after the real issues and start changing the dialogue. But yeah, unfortunately, they did start going after stand-up comics, and with Count Dankula's thing and with a couple other comedians or I've seen tweets from you guys where comedians will be on the BBC or whatever, and they'll say something. And then people say, oh, where are the police at? It's like, don't the police have enough to worry about instead of going after comedians for saying something on a television show? So I hope you're right. And I hope, that is kind of like the first step into going the other way, because it's just absolutely ridiculous, and to say this one guy, because he has one clip on his Facebook page, which nobody has seen, I'm sure.
Right. And at least that's current, right?
Yeah.
But comedians are getting sacked for what they did 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's a good point. Yeah. There's like retro action.
Yeah.
Against
There's
them,
retroactive jokes. I mean, from Aboriginal jokes that the guy who was hosting the Oscars got it.
Yeah. We're not locking them up here like the UK is. What we're doing though is we're just destroying their careers and preventing them from having like.
Has anyone gone to prison in the UK?
I'm not entirely sure. I know people have been convicted, but these kind of crimes typically incur a fine rather than a custodial sentence. There was a case of some young girl who posted some Snoop Dogg lyrics on her Instagram, which contained the N-word, and she got conviction for that. So it's insane. Going back to what
tribute to her fallen friend too.
Yes.
Somebody who died.
Yeah, so that's where we are essentially. But it's interesting what you said about, might be able to tie this back into Carl Benjamin actually, about going back through someone's history and digging that up. And I saw Toby Young, who writes for The Spectator in the UK, he kind of referred to this phenomenon as outrage archaeology, which I think is
that's great.
Which is great.
Brilliant.
But what I wanted to touch on is the fact that long story short, Carl Benjamin sent that tweet out to Jess Phillips years and years ago. I wouldn't even rape you. And this was in response to Jess Phillips trying to put forward legislation which would curtail speech on the internet. And it was, Carl knew what he was doing. It was treated in some circles as a rape threat, which it categorically wasn't. Whether he was right or wrong to do that's a different debate, but it wasn't a rape threat. He tweeted this, and that caused a lot of commotion in the press. It also caused a lot of commotion at your conference when he was invited. And furthermore, that has what's taken up the bulk of the discussion around his UKIP candidacy. That's all anyone's ever wanted to talk about. So, I mean, what is the statute of limitations for an off-colour comment or an egregious comment or a wrong comment, whatever you want to call it? At what point do we say, well, that was then, it was dealt with then, can we talk about something else?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's funny, too, when I was out there on the UKIP campaign trail, if you will. It was funny. It was like all the stuff that UKIP and like what was being talked about on the BBC. I was like, oh, we already went through that, like years ago. So it was funny seeing how like you guys are just going through the rape tweet thing, and but no, I obviously Sargon Carl, he knew what he was doing with that. My thing was, I always gave Jess Phillips a lot of credit for not entertaining it. And it was really sad to see that she fell to the victim narrative that she did. Oh, it affected me so much, blah, blah, blah.
Initially, she said she didn't care.
Initially, she said she didn't care, that's the way you handle these things, because all she's going to do is give it more press and it's going to become a bigger thing and blah, blah, blah. But then as soon as the BBC picked it up and it hit the UKIP trail, she changed her story. And I'm like, come on, this is, obviously now she's going for the
It's kind of like the guy that gets hit in a car, right? And he's like, oh man, I got backed in, and no big deal, right?
Yeah.
And this and that. And then somebody's like, you realize you can get insurance money.
Yeah.
Oh, my neck.
It's hurting.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was really unfortunate for me to see. But I mean, again, one comment. This is the interesting thing, and I was actually there with Carl and his parents and Milo. We had dinner. That was that was an interesting situation. Yeah, talk about a weird and awesome thing at the same time. But I was talking with Carl's parents. And they brought up something really, really important that a lot of people don't think about. Like, they can talk about that tweet all they want, but that's all they have. It's not like Carl has, harassed somebody or gotten fired for doing something or has a record. That's it.
But there is a claim that he would sick his followers on certain people.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I'm just saying, isn't it funny? Like that, if that's all they have is one tweet, that just seems like that's garbage.
I mean, how do you define this? I get accused of this occasionally when I will quote tweet somebody as if people get really offended, like, dude, how dare you set your followers on me, kind of thing. And I'm thinking, well, this isn't a restaurant. I haven't just come over to your table and said, there he is, get him. I'm responding to something you've put out publicly. So I don't quite know what the rules are in terms of social media engagement if using a perfectly valid and encouraged function is to be considered dogpiling or beyond the pale. I mean, surely it's only considered that by people because I've drew negative attention to it. If I was to draw positive attention to it, suddenly it would be perfectly fine that I've quote tweeted somebody.
I mean, can the news do anything? Is it the New York Times when they investigate something? Is that just sicking their readers? X company that might be dumping chemicals in the river or something?
No, it's such a bad argument. And unless you explicitly come out and say all of my followers go do something, like what? You can't control people. People make up their own minds again.
No, there can be a culture, and I think this is actually developing a little bit, and this is all over, where they'll say, hey, please don't dogpile this person. Yeah. And that's fine. And again, but you still can't control the people that are going to anyway.
I would say Carl and Bering and those guys are like really the ones I've seen do it most. I really haven't seen a lot of people say, hey, by the way, don't harass this person, but here's the story.
Yeah, or when you're showing like a random Facebook tweet that you're trying to critique the idea, and then they'll basically redact the name.
Yeah.
This is a good cultural thing.
That's smart.
That's a smart thing.
I think in terms of I think what you want is a good faith badge. I think want people to know that when you engage in these things, that you are doing so in good faith. And them kind of things, obviously saying don't jump on people, redacting names, and that is kind of like an example of sort of a good faith way of operating. So maybe people become more valued, and maybe it'll become more popular to behave that way. Is my hope.
Yeah, I agree. And
the perception is the idea versus the person. Are you criticizing Jess Phillips' idea, or are you criticizing Jess Phillips, the person? And I think the two different sides saw it a different way.
Well, and I'm sure Carl or Bering or any of these guys, you, Steven, I'm sure if you put something out there that was critical of something, and then one of your quote unquote followers did something, you would condemn it, and that's the kind of the difference with AOC. When she was talking about concentration camps and that guy threw fire bombs at the ICE facility,
she wouldn't condemn it.
And then she didn't condemn it. You have to condemn it.
Has she still not released any statement on that whatsoever?
It's just not. Yeah, she hasn't said she condones it, but nothing.
That's shocking.
Yeah, she was explicitly asked about it, and she didn't say anything. Like, you have to condemn it at that point. I think that's your responsibility as the influencer or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. If everyone's going to rage and scream for Donald Trump to condemn every single police shooting or act of white supremacy, then I think that at least somebody who's actually weighed in on this conversation very heavily, because she's very vocal about ICE I nearly said concentration camps, the ICE facilities there. I think she does have a duty to say, okay, criticism's fine, but individual acts of vigilantism are unacceptable. And I'm actually surprised she hasn't done that, because she's not, I don't agree with her ideologically, but she doesn't seem like a poor person in that sense.
No, but at the same time, I don't know what she's saying. And to be fair, I mean, we're critical of the left, but we're critical of the right too. Donald Trump yesterday took a call from Kanye West to get one of his rapper friends out of jail in, was it Sweden? Yeah. And it's like, Jesus Christ. Like, come on, like, this is ridiculous.
This sounds like a random headline generator, doesn't it?
It was just so random, and because it's Kanye West, and I'm just thinking to myself, isn't Kanye and Kim Kardashian, aren't they influential enough to go over to Sweden to get this guy out of jail? Like, I don't know, but
but when Trump says, we need to send them back, right? Naturalized American citizens, send them back to their countries. Like,
we don't support that.
Yeah,
either.
that's wrong, objectively in every way. But then I would see takes, so one of my good friends had to take, like, the Republican Party is now united and getting rid of or expelling all people of color from America.
Wow.
And I thought that I resisted the urge to, like, put a gif of a straw man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those comments for me would be on the pale. And I think what was more concerning was the crowd chanting back to him and him not picking up on that, or not objecting or clarifying or correcting in that moment. That was a real lack of leadership. But I don't know why I'd be surprised.
He did after the fact.
Yes, that's true.
Well, that was the funny thing is, like, after the fact, he said, no, I don't appreciate that. He essentially condemned it at that point. But then you saw people on the left saying, he's lying, he's a liar. And it's like,
but again, that's intentions, right? Because you could be a deer in the headlights that you just didn't know what to say.
Yeah, he said,
the right
he said his way was to
right in front
speak
of you.
faster. That's what he said. His resolve was to start speaking faster. It's like, come on, dude, like, shut that down.
But at least he can change. And Donald Trump, like, when they question his intentions, this is weird, because they're saying, well, no, he's just saying that. But Donald Trump is known to double down on everything.
Yeah, it's true.
And this one, he's flipped.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we, when Trump doubles down on everything, why wouldn't we believe him on this?
Yeah,
that's
and that was the interesting thing. Tim Pool brought that up. It's like, we don't accept apologies anymore. And it's gotten to a point where, even if you do apologize, and the Scarlett Johansson thing where she did come out and say, no, that's not what I meant, I apologize, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, she's cancelled.
And she's, it's never good enough. So,
well,
it's tough.
My feeling on this whole Trump thing is that he's consistently put his foot in his mouth leading up to the presidency and after it, and said and done things that I deeply dislike. And the media outrage is always the same. They all go for the jugular. There's this big hoo-ha, and then they move on to the next thing and do it again and again and again. And each and every time that happens, Trump's followers do not care. And Trump doesn't care, and nothing happens. And this is what I see here now. I think this is another distraction. I think they're constantly focusing on all the ways Trump is terrible, but not getting a grasp on the things that would actually make a difference to his presidency and his chance of re-election. They don't seem to be getting hold of the issues that voters actually care about, because many of them couldn't give two shits whether Trump misspoke or said something on PC or made a potentially racist comment. They just want to know that he's going to make America the best country in the world. He's going to sort out the immigration problem. He's got his eyes on the terrorists. He's going to produce new jobs, etc. So, I mean,
you become numb when the accusations of racism are thrown out so randomly that you just don't believe it anymore. And you say these people are just automatically disingenuous. And then when there might be real racism in there, you miss it because there's too many false alarms.
Yeah, I agree. For me, like, being a racist is probably one of the worst possible things to be. So on that belief, I'm very, very careful about applying the label. I have to have a cast iron example of racism before I'll say that person's a racist. But it seems to, in other circles, it seems to flow very easily to the point where you have to work your way backwards from that label for no good reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's gotten to a point too where people are just nervous to even make comments to those that aren't in their quote unquote race because they don't want to be perceived as racist, and that's counterproductive as well. We need to be able to have honest discussion.
But
with
you
people.
do see a preferred narrative, right, on this that we should. It seems like the preferred narrative is to call more things racist than they actually are, and to aid the marginalized peoples. I mean, corporate America does this a lot as well. I mean, the fact that Colin Kaepernick was put in so Nike grabs him now. I mean, Colin Kaepernick has his own way of protesting, but it seems like it's on the narrative. And Nike knows they can make money from this. Gillette knows they can make money from calling out toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. So this is why we created the corporate America, should demonetize. What role should corporate America play in activism? Yeah. And it's weird because you do see this leaning one way.
Yeah. And I was at that CNN business reporter. It was a CNN business reporter who was like, I reached out to Nike, who's at Nike, like a bunch of big player corporations, and to ask about Donald Trump's statements, whether or not they're racist. So
some activists, fired out to like all these major corporations, and they wanted to know what are your thoughts
on Trump's tweets, whether or not they're racist.
Most didn't return the calls, and one said no comment.
Right.
That's where we need to get to.
Yeah, because we need to ask Chase Bank this, right? We need to ask
Walmart. Hey, Walmart, is this racist? Like, come on.
Right.
The great philosophers, the great philosophers at Arby's needs to weigh in on trans bathrooms.
What's Honda's view on this?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Stephen. Here's a random observation for you. I've been following more of Sean Ono Lennon. Are you familiar? He's the son of Yoko Ono and John Lennon.
I'm not aware. No.
Yeah, he's on Twitter, and it's really interesting because, all right, if you're going to be the offspring of two individuals like John Lennon and Yoko Ono, I mean, those are the most progressive, liberal people I can, of their times that I can like kind of put my finger on. And it's interesting. He's kind of coming back. He's on Twitter. He's kind of going after identity politics. It's really interesting. Like, you should check out his Twitter account. It's interesting seeing the son of John Lennon and Yoko Ono start, kicking back against some of this craziness that's happening. I mean, how nuts is that?
Wow, I will take a look.
And John Lennon's Imagine is supposed to be like, the
exactly.
It's the progressive anthem, isn't it?
The
progressive anthem, like Stephen said.
Right.
Yeah, there's always some wanker with a piano turns up 5 minutes after a terrorist attack in the UK to bash out a rendition of Imagine.
Yeah.
But, right. But I mean, in some ways, I can see why it's a beautiful song.
Yeah.
Right? But again, you're talking about a utopia. I mean, it would be just a great song of a world with no disease.
Yeah.
But is that practical? Is that
But
realistic?
it's even fun. The point I was just driving at, it's funny to see their son like bucking against the progressive, narrative.
Unexpected, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this has flown by as usual, as our conversations always seem to do. Where can people find out more about the amazing convention you've got planned? Where can they get tickets?
So they can go on irl.minds.com, and that'll be for the series. So it's IRL, like in real life, .minds.
Yeah, if you Google Minds IRL, you'll
that
get
works
right
too.
to it.
Yeah, and so that's the series. So we have the New Jersey event already announced, and you can see the lineup. We are working on future cities. We are trying to go global with it too. We're not trying to stay in the U.S. So it all
This
depends.
event is what, 41 days away? It's on August 31st.
It's on Saturday, August 31st. So if you don't have your tickets, get them. We are trying to make this thing profitable enough to where we can redo it. What a lot of people don't understand in the space is these events typically are read constantly, and it doesn't matter what event it is. Like the overhead costs are so high that it's really hard to make those up. And if we can get it to where it's profitable, we want to do it again in other cities and continue the series. So that's our goal. So we do have New Jersey planned. We're really excited, obviously, to have you back, Steven. It's always so fun having you. It's like you're like one of our gang, but you're like in a different country. It's like when you come in, it's like, oh yeah, there's Steven. He just fits right in. It's really awesome.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, I feel the same. I kind of last time I thought these are my people. I feel at home. Yeah, and it's not. And I mean, the interesting thing about that, people listening might assume that's because we just agree on everything. But I think the idea is that we're open to discussion. I know I can have my view, and I know I'll get a thoughtful response in return without any of you throwing a milkshake on me, which is always lovely.
Yeah,
exactly.
And discussions where you lower the temperature. I mean, right now I'm convinced that media is doing that. It pays to create rhetoric. It gets clicks, right? But eventually you've turned the temperature up so much on the country or in the West that you may see a reverb that people talking about this normally, people wanting to get away from this, may go to a more straight news source like Subverse, may migrate to a place like Minds, where you don't have the bias. And in discussions like these at Minds IRL and at MythCon that are lowering the temperature on this, where you can discuss this in a sane way. Like this, if we can monetize it, we could flip, you could flip the supply and demand issue.
And I just want to point out to those that have never been to one of these things, they're actually a lot of fun. If you listen to some people online, they like to say things about other things and completely mischaracterize them. These are actually really, really fun events. The funny thing is, like, the people that come have a great time. Everyone talks, even though people on the left and right, you can't tell who's a progressive by looking at them. No. It's pretty funny, or who's a conservative. Unless they have like
unless you're wearing the MAGA hat. That's a giveaway.
And even those people, they're fun. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. We haven't had any issues. All the speakers always say they have such a good time. All the attendees always say they had a good time, and
you get a chance to talk to Steven and the other speakers and the other moderators. That's cool.
And the funny thing that I always point out too, it's like when you see Antifa and all this crazy violence and stuff, it's always at these free street events or these free events. They typically stay away from events where they actually have to pay to get into. Have you ever noticed that? That's one of the things I've noticed. They don't show up to the ones where you got to pay $75.
Fuck capitalism, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. You guys, if you've never been, you should come and hang out. It's really, really good time.
But again, we have to. The only way to do this, rather than forcing someone else to your opinion, is to lead by example. So we think this is the best way to do it, and we're trying to create a market for it.
Honestly, can't wait. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in on these panels and hanging out with you guys as well. So, and thanks very much for coming on the show, giving up a bit of time to speak to me about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Good to talk to you, Steven.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Godless Spellchecker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation, produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?